First and foremost, I want to thank you so much for coming on my platform. I really appreciate the work that you're doing and also you taking out the time to stop by.
Thank you for inviting me.
This is definitely an honor. For the viewers who may not recognize you, could you let them know what your name is, where you're from, and definitely what do you do?
My name is Dr. Ife Williams. I'm in Philadelphia, and I am an Africologist. Any and everything related to African and African descendants, I am interested in. I recently published a book on police brutality in Philadelphia, and I also have a website, Black Slave Revolts, one word.org, that marks slave revolts of African and African descendants, and also the resistance of our people to colonialism and their involvement in the civil rights movement.
Wow, okay, that's definitely some amazing work. I would like to know when did you develop this passion for being an Africologist and history and police brutality? Is it something you've always been into, or did you kind of get into it later in life?
No, growing up in Philadelphia was a hotbed of activity related to Black people. So I've always kind of had the interest. After high school, I went to Lincoln University and studied Black history, and it was like the light bulb went off. So it came to me so easily, and I was so interested in it. And then following that, I went to Clark Atlanta University and received my doctorate that focused on Blacks in the American political system and Africans and African descendants in world politics.
Wow, okay, okay. Now, do you actually teach courses?
Yes, I presently teach at Delaware County Community College in Philadelphia. I teach political science, and African American history.
Wow, okay. I definitely take my hat off to you because it seems like a lot of people take history for granted, especially in our community because we've been so disconnected from it, but we don't realize how empowering it can be to, dig into them archives and find out, in particular about the revolts and the rebellions and the people that was fighting back.
Exactly. And I was just informed last week that there's a group of young people who are saying, we are not our ancestors. We fight back. And I'm thinking, you don't know your ancestors because they fought at every stage. And one of the things that stands out the most to me with the map on Black slave revolts is that most of those revolts happened right around the coast of Africa. So our ancestors were fighting from the beginning, trying to stop it. We have this narrative of they were just giving us away. That's just propaganda to keep us from uniting with our people on the continent.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, have you traveled to the continent? What parts of the continent, and what has that done for you personally?
Yes, I have traveled. My first trip was to Zimbabwe in, I think, 1981. So your first country is always your first love. And after that, I did travel to other countries, South Africa, Tanzania, Ghana. And what it has done for me was it just widened my worldview. And there's just so much to know about not only our ancestors, but our cousins across the ocean, the lives. It's hard to explain to Africans why we're so angry, because we live in the belly of the beast. And see, they don't have that experience. Everywhere they look, there are other people who look just like them. So they have a sense of pride and respect and a calmness that we don't have here in the United States. And I really realized that after I was in Tanzania for months and returned to the United States, and the whole that weight of racism just landed on my shoulders, and I could really see the rest and relief I had when I was living abroad.
Yes, indeed. I could relate. I visited about 20 African countries the last two
Oh,
years. Yeah, I've been in Africa. I was in Ghana for a year, and I was in Madagascar for 6 months. I stayed in South Africa for a year. So it's definitely been a life-changing experience. So that's my ultimate goal, is to live in Africa. But I've just been kind of bouncing around and see, um, which country would be best for me, because a lot of us, we take for granted Africa is the most diverse continent. So it's so much more than what we've been taught. You know what I'm saying?
right. Well, what were you doing? Were you studying?
Um, well, for the most part, I was just learning, getting into that culture and that history. Being in Ghana was a great experience. Going to Cape Coast, going to Elmina. Like you say, we had misconceptions that maybe our people just let us go and they never fought back. So learning that was empowering as well, and it made me look at my brothers and sisters differently. So I was learning for the most part, and I do volunteer. I try to give back and connect with brothers and sisters on the continent and invite, other brothers and sisters to come visit. Now, you do tours as well?
Yes, every once in a while, because it's a lot with the tour. I've led tours to South Africa and Ghana, and I plan to perhaps lead a tour to Senegal. I didn't mention that part of the work on the maps, and let me just add a little commercial to the maps to your listeners. If they go to the site, it's one word, blackslaverevolts.org. You'll see everybody's familiar with Google Maps, and they have the markers on them. So that's just what it looks like. It looks like a Google map, except the markers are slave chains. And every marker that you open gives you text, video, images, and citations of that particular revolt. So there were over 263 revolts on land, and there have been 500 documented revolts at sea. However, I took it down to 100 revolts that I considered were successful, where the Africans got away or they killed the entire crew. And from that, I reduced it down to 58, where I could provide a lot of information. And the ship revolts were accessioned by the Smithsonian. Somehow or another, they found the map online, and they have an exhibit now that will run till June 6th if the museum doesn't close. And it's called In the Wake of Slavery. It's their first international exhibit. And what they're doing is contrasting the present situation of Black people with enslavement. So, for example, they do object pairing. They would have slave shackles and handcuffs. You know. So anyway, that exhibit is going to leave there and travel, hopefully, in June. It's going to go to Brazil, Senegal, South Africa, Belgium, and Liverpool. So the plan now is, if and when, we're hoping, it gets out and starts traveling around, that I will lead tours. Because every time I tell somebody, yeah, the exhibit is going to Brazil, they're like, oh, I want to go, I want to go. So I said I would organize and take people with me so we could see the openings at each location. So that's been pretty exciting.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's definitely phenomenal. You mentioned Brazil. I got a chance to study abroad there. One of the things I loved about Brazil is when you speak about the African history, they'll say, we got this religion from Nigeria, we got this martial art from Angola, we got this from the Congo. They really give it up for Africa, but it seems like in the States, it's not so much like that, you know. And I wanted to ask you about this as well. How long did it take you to complete this map?
Mm. Well, the first map on slave revolts, I would say it took a couple of years because I didn't work on it steady. You know, in the interim, I did my book and then I was working and doing other things. But in 2018, I just dedicated time to finish it. And then it only took a few months. My second map on anti-colonial and civil rights movements, which is also on the same site under a different tab, that has taken a full year. I started last February and I'm wrapping up now, but it is live. Mhm.
Wow. Okay. So you said the second map, it goes into the civil rights movement.
Right. The second map does we look at resistance of African and African descendants to colonialism and segregation and oppression. So it's the same theme. I do the markers, but this time the markers are fist, and each fist you open again gives you text, video, images, citations of that particular movement. And I really wanted to do that because by the year 2050, the majority of the population of Black people will be like around 25 years of age. And at the trajectory that we're going now with increased repression, people need to know about resistance and the history of resistance and the strategies and what happened. And so that was really the inspiration there. And also on that map, a lot of people don't realize the revolutionary wars in Africa. Most people know Mau Mau in Kenya. Of course, they'll know South Africa and apartheid, but very few people will know, names of Amilcar Cabral or Samora Machel, right? So I was able to put those movements on the map as well. So everywhere you go, everywhere you look on that map and those markers, and each marker is different because I'm really into visuals. So every marker is different. I had a number of young people animate some of the revolts. Mhm. So my purpose was to keep people engaged, just engaged on the map, and to learn as much as possible because people don't read anymore. Most people don't read. And so this way you get a lot of information. And of course, with the citations, it's a scholarly uh, uh, um, site. So the citations are there that I use to do the research. So you can go and open them and further your knowledge about any of the movements. Mhm. Oh, and then the question I always got about the slave revolt map was, what about the women? And yes, there were a number of women who, I think almost every revolt, you had women, okay? But you also had a number of women who led and strategized the revolts. So on the second map, I made a separate marker, a purple marker with a fist to show the women and their role in resistance against colonialism and oppression. Mhm.
Wow. Okay, that's really really cool. I'm looking at the map. I'm not sure if I'm looking at the right one, but I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and I wrote this book about the Afro set. Are you familiar with them?
Who? No.
Oh, okay. So it was a black nationalist movement in Cleveland. Because, Carl Stokes, he was the first black mayor.
Right.
So he was kind of like, I guess, the Obama of his day. But he would help the black nationalist groups. He would give them money. He would, go to different meetings and talk to them and stuff. So it was definitely a major rebellion in the city of Cleveland. I had to send you some more
Oh
information
yeah, you
about
have
it.
to send that to me so I can put it in. It definitely needs a marker. Yes, please send that to me.
Yeah, yeah, it was a real big like shootout, and I think at that time they were saying it was the most police officers that ever got shot in one event, and it was the first time where it was more white casualties than black casualties. So it was like a turning point in 1968.
Wow. Yes, please send that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Now I want to ask you about this. You have some documentaries, if you could speak about those.
One documentary. And this goes back to your question in Africa. I was in Tanzania doing a Fulbright at University of Dar es Salaam, and I watched the series called The Africans by Ali Mazrui, and in one of them, just one line just captured me when he said, "Africa is not a zoo." And that always just stayed with me because every time you mention Africa, people they want to talk about the big five, elephants and lions. I'm like, people live there. It's not a zoo. And so what I did was while I was in Tanzania, the Maasai were really one of the only groups who had a legal right to their land. Okay, because Tanzania was only one of the only countries that recognized customary land rights, and they still lost their land for a game park. They went to court and everything. They were relocated from their land into this barren area, and they're pastoralists, and they were supposed to grow food, and of course, the people were starving. It was horrible. But anyway, so my documentary is called Africa's Not a Zoo. And it's on my website, drifewilliams1word.com. And it's only 21 minutes long. But what I did was I contrasted a few countries. So I looked at not only Tanzania, but Zanzibar, Namibia, and Ghana. They all have game reserves. And I wanted to do Kenya, but it was too political. And they all show how the people who live in that area have been subordinated, removed from their land, and the animals were given more respect and rights to the people. In Tanzania, in the video I show, where the animals are in Ngorongoro just drinking up all the water and pouring water all over themselves and each other. And then, a few miles away in the village, the people don't even have access to fresh water. So, I mean, it's still going on, and because it's looked at as a major revenue source, being tourism. But however, it has a very devastating impact on the communities.
I really appreciate you shedding light on that. Now, I would like to ask you about your book, Police Brutality, a Philadelphia Story. Was it something in particular that inspired you to write this? And how long did it take to write this?
Whole life. Actually, it's a very good question. When I was in high school in the 70s, I wasn't really political and I really didn't care that much about anything. But there was an incident. There was a young man, and he had to be about my age, who was being taken to court for his trial. So he was being taken off the police van. He was handcuffed. This is the middle of the afternoon, downtown City Hall. And the police said he tried to escape, and they shot him in the back of the head. And I don't know, that just shook my world, and it just never left me, because it was just so nonsensical. What in the world? And of course, no one was held accountable for it, because in those times, well, still like that, but at that time, the police officers were not punished at all. And so by the time, and I was only 17 years old, but by the time I went to graduate school in my 20s, and we had to choose a topic for our dissertation, I didn't think twice. I said police brutality in Philadelphia. Plus also we had the move situation here and how they were treated in the 70s and up to the bombing in 1985. So yeah, I started in the 20s when I was about 20. And then I tried to get it published. And I want to say this because I sent it to one publisher and they said that they weren't interested in the topic. Okay, well, this was, in the 70s. Of course they weren't interested in it. And so I put it on the shelf. And I just want to say to people, who are writing, that I met a woman who had received so many rejection letters. She says she wallpapered a whole wall in her office before her book was accepted. So I just want to say, don't give up. If the first publisher just send it out, send it out. But I thought, oh, it's not that good. Let me just put it on the shelf. So I did. And of course, history. After that was one police brutality situation after another. And every time something happened, I was like, oh man, because it was the same narratives for each one. My thesis was redress against police brutality, that the community did not really have full redress. And so we have here in Philadelphia the Blockson Collection at Temple University, which is second to the Schomburg in New York in its holdings of everything in the world related to Black people, magazines, articles, books. So it was there, and the librarian there told me I would take my classes there. And she would say, this is the only book we have on police brutality in Philadelphia. She says, you need to publish it. No, she's saying my dissertation. She said, you need to publish your dissertation. You really need to do it. I'm like, Well, right before Black Lives Matter popped, I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And so I went back and revised the book, and only new chapters. I added a new one on Mumia, because by this time Mumia had happened. So I added a new chapter on him and another chapter on looking at current day. So remember, this was written in the 80s, current day laws regarding police brutality. So those are only two chapters. And so it was published in 2023. And so I'm happy about that. It's on Amazon. And shameless plug, Police Brutality in Philadelphia, Dr. Ife Williams. Yes.
Wow. Okay. I appreciate you sharing that. But like you say, it's so much that's still going on, because it's like all of us, we kind of have this time where we can reflect back to a story of police brutality as African Americans, where it just kind of changes us. I know me myself, coming from Cleveland, my next door neighbor, he was 15 years old and the police shot him 10 times. He only made it to the 8th grade. And then that's when it kind of, the light bulb came on for me. Like, we still going through the same thing our parents and grandparents was going through, So let me see. Okay, I wanted to ask you about this. You're doing some work on reparations.
You're the first person to ask about that. Yeah. Yes, I'm a reparationist. Mm-hmm. And I really, really got into it during the World Conference Against Racism that was held in South Africa. Leading up to that conference, the non-governmental organizations were pushing. We had an African and African Descendants caucus, and we were pushing for reparations and to have the governments to not only apologize, but to provide some reparations. And we really fought. We lost it politically, but we won intellectually. But after that, I did a a chapter in a book on Blacks in Foreign Policy by Michael West. And I talked about that whole process of going through the United Nations and getting getting the language included on reparations in the governmental documents. So I mean, it was just such an experience to be with scholars and activists from all over the world, and to have this common bond. So I still work on reparations. Uh, I received a Fulbright, second Fulbright, to go to Barbados. Barbados was one of the first countries to establish a commission on reparations. And, when I heard that, well, I was ecstatic. And so I went to the country and I followed their proceedings. I interviewed everybody on the task force and some government people, and put together a document that you just reminded me that still isn't published. That is living in my computer. That's yet to come out. But yes. And one thing I want to say about reparations, you usually say reparations, Black people say, "Oh man, this is a waste of time. We're not going to get it." But I heard the best analogy. If you would have asked a Black person in 1830 if they were ever going to be free from slavery, what would they have said? No. I'm a slave. My mother was a slave. My grandmother was a slave. Because by then, you're 1830, you're almost in the 5 generations of slaves, right? So you ask Black people about reparations first, oh no, we're never going to get it. It's the same mentality. It took us 100 years to get out of slavery, another 100 years to get rid of segregation and colonialism, and it's going to take another 100 years, but we will prevail. Trust me.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Now, I can ask you this for people who are, they want to get involved, but they may not know what to do in terms of reparation. Do we got to vote a certain way? Do we have to sign a petition? What exactly do we need to do to help, get this going?
Oh, that's a good question. There's going to be a huge reparations gathering on May 17th in Washington, D.C. And there are a number of organizations that are dealing with reparations, depending on where you're living. I would kind of steer away from ADOS, African Descendants of Slaves, because they're not historically correct. I mean, what they want is on target. Darity did the numbers. This is what you need. But this whole focus just on African Americans kind of negates our history, because, I mean, look, Malcolm X's people from the Caribbean. Most of our scholars are from the Caribbean. So you had all these people going back and forth. But anyway, yeah, there are a number of organizations that have reparations as part of their platform. And a simple Google search for you in your community will let you know what some of these organizations are and what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I would support only one. Like I said, only one that I would veer away from is ADOS. But it seems like everybody else is on target.
Okay. I appreciate you sharing that information. So we're about 30 minutes in, so I would like to ask you, for the viewers who want to support what you're doing and keep up with what you got going on, do you have a website or social media? What's the best way for them to keep up with you?
Okay. I have email, Black Resistance, one word, 215 at gmail.com. I have my own personal website, drifewilliams.com. And please, please, please go to blackslaverevolts.org and look at the 2 maps, and then email me. Let me know what you're thinking and how, and how you like it. So far, I've received very positive reviews. The slave revolts map went up at the beginning of the pandemic, and I had over 235,000 views. Mhm. Oh, I put it on the African Heritage Studies Association website. So here's another plug. What you can do, especially if you live on the Northeast Coast. African Heritage Studies Association, AHSA, was founded by John Henry Clark. Please go to their website. Our conference is going to be held October 24th in Philadelphia. We need lots of help and lots of participation.
Okay. So I want to thank you again so much for the work that you're doing. I really
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for stopping by. Continue the great work, and thank you to the viewers for tuning in as well.
Thank you very much. And please don't forget to send me the information on your book so I can add another marker.
Yeah. Okay, I'll make sure I send it to you.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.